Welcome back to Redefine Parenting with your host, Veenu Keller. We want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and H.E.R Network on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Zingo TV is a free app that can be downloaded on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire Sticks, Roku and Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Redefine Parenting is a revolutionary approach to nurturing our children. Veenu will bring you live experts, transformative insights, and a fresh perspective, all aimed at helping families worldwide truly understand their children. Together, let's give them a childhood they won't have to heal from. Hello and welcome back. I'm so excited to have a reoccurring guest, Anastacia Arauz, who is a licensed therapist here in North Carolina. And I'm excited because we're going to talk about a topic that's really near and dear to my heart because I work with a lot of clients as a coach that have anxiety as kids, and she as well as a therapist. So Anastacia, welcome back to Redefine Parenting.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So let's go ahead and just dive into this. I mean, I know that you have programs and stuff that you've done and, you're working in schools and stuff with kids. Is this one of the things that you're going to be addressing?
Yes, for sure. Like kids are really struggling with anxiety right now. And anxiety is up in this, like if you think statistically, like 20% of kids are struggling with anxiety worldwide. So it's a huge amount of children. And people don't know, many parents don't know how to necessarily address it if they're struggling with it also. Right. So it's really important topic to understand.
So, I mean, I'll share what I see with kids that have anxiety. A lot of anxiety for the kids that I work with, it shows up in their behavior. Sometimes the younger kids, it shows up in temper tantrums. It shows up in what parents call meltdowns. In older teenagers, I see it as kind of rebellion. People might even say oppositional defiant, but it's really not. It's their body and they're going through. And I was just in California working with a client recently. And I told the parents, I said, I really feel like he has a social anxiety. Like he just gets overstimulated. It's like his skin is crawling. He doesn't know what else to do. So he has this meltdown because what happens when he has a meltdown? Everything stops. We give him the attention he needs. We get him out of the situation and then he's able to calm himself. So, there was things like that I see. I'm curious, what is it that you see in your clients?
Yeah, anxiety definitely with the older kids, like the teenagers, presents as anger a lot of times. And it's so confusing because parents think that the child is being disrespectful, rude, oppositional, like you're saying. And it's really anxiety, and it's presenting itself as the anxiety is presenting itself so much as the anger and mean and just aggressive behaviors. So I do see that. I do think with the little ones, it can present if they don't have the language to express themselves. They're crying, they're tantruming. They are very physical with their bodies at times because they can't express what's going on.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what are the things that parents can do? Like, first of all, I think understanding what anxiety looks like, because I think a lot of kids get misdiagnosed all the time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is that. And I also see that anxiety is also the uncertainty of what to expect. The uncertainty, is there going to be judgment? The uncertainty of, am I going to fail? The uncertainty, that's why there's different types of anxiety, test anxiety, social anxiety. There's different types of anxiety that we've been able to label. And I would say that that's one of the first things that parents really need to understand is, what are they looking at? And are we calling it what it is?
Right. And so I think a lot of times you can go as far as getting a diagnosis from a licensed professional. You can also just pay attention to what your child, how they're acting, what they're doing, really seeking a professional if it's something severe, if they're not sleeping, if they're struggling in school, if they're having social issues, if they are stressed out, if you're noticing things that they're doing with their body, like maybe pulling their hair or scratching or any of the cutting. Those all can present themselves when a child is very anxious. So if it gets to those levels where you're not able to stop the things in the home, really reaching out to someone to help you, a professional that can help you see if it is a diagnosis that needs to be anxiety.
Right, right. And let's just talk about if it's not a diagnosis, but we are seeing things like this. I always tell people, if we are constantly dealing with the effects of what's happening,
it's just putting a Band-Aid over it. That you got to really dive in and get to the cause of what's creating this in order to, get rid of it, or at least understand it, to redirect that behavior into something else. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that if parents are seeing these different types of behaviors, what could they do? Because I really don't think that we need a label to do something. Like, if you see something, do something, right? And so what are some of the things that you suggest to families, and like when you're actually working with kids?
So depending on where they are developmentally, it depends on what suggestions and what strategies that I offer. One of the biggest things for any of the ages that you're working with in children is having a predictable routine. The kid, when a child knows what's supposed to happen, when we know as adults, the schedule for the day or what's going to happen next, that right there is something that will help with them to calm their nervous system. So having a predictable routine and schedule, I share with parents, they can write it out, print it out and put it on the refrigerator, or talk about it on the way to carpool, or plan a week out on Sunday, have the week planned out. Kids need to have a routine. That's why schools have routines and why things are so predictable. Kids have to have an established routine. Another thing that I talk a lot about, as the kids are older, really explaining to them what is happening with their body, really getting into, if they're talking about their stomach hurting or their head hurting, really talking about those symptoms and that there's nothing wrong with them. It could be stress, it could be anxiety. So here are some things we can do to help, which could be breathing or relaxation, or just communicating with them about their feelings.
Yeah, I really can appreciate that too, is really helping kids to open up and feel safe enough to tell you what's really going on with them. Like, what are they really feeling? Like, my daughter is very vocal about not being heard. Mm-hmm. And what I've realized with her, it's not so much that she's not being heard and understood. She's not getting the answer she wants. Mm-hmm. So she interprets that as, my mom doesn't hear me. My dad doesn't hear me. They're not listening to me. And then when I tell her, I have heard you and I can fully appreciate this is what you want, and the answer is still no. Mm-hmm. And then you give them the why, because I am one of those parents that do believe when your kid asks why, tell them why. Mm-hmm. Don't just make it because my mom used to, because I'm your mom and I told you so. So yeah. I won't say I don't ever do that. I'm sure I've done it before. However, I stay away from doing that. And I really believe in giving an answer. So if I'm communicating with my kid, then that gives them space to communicate with me. So when it's like, why, I explain to them why. Mm-hmm. I give them the why. And if it's not the why that they want, they're like, I just don't understand. Like, why can't I do it? And it goes down a rabbit hole. And so I think sometimes, it's really about helping kids understand, again, developmentally. My daughter's 11. So developmentally, it's helping them understand. But I don't also think it comes down to age. I was like talking to her teacher today, and she's like, well, I told her, another teacher told the class, and my daughter's like, I didn't hear that. Mm-hmm. And I told the teacher, I said, I don't know what's going on, but she's not hearing it when two different adults are giving it. And she's like, she's so distracted. Mm-hmm. But she's really trying. That's what she said. She's really trying, but you're right. She's so distracted that it's kind of going right over her head. So again, developmentally, she's fine, but there are certain challenges. Like, she has dyslexia. She has been diagnosed with ADHD. Mm-hmm. We have put her on medications to help her stay focused through the day. So I think would you say it's even more sometimes than just developmentally, that it's like understanding where your kids are at with even, socially.
Yeah. Yes. And what's happening in their lives. So depending to what's going on in a child's life, can add to the stressors, add to the anxiety, add to whatever the pressure it is they're feeling. And then all of us are also individual, and we all react differently to different things. So you have one child that might act completely fine in a situation, and the other one is so sensitive and can be triggered to it. So it's really understanding the individual needs of that child. In a situation, like, you could go, say, to a theme park, and you have one child that absolutely loves the crowds and loves being there, but then you might have another one that it's going to send them over the edge to be in line and hot and standing there. So really understanding that about each child in your family, and what they can handle and what they are able to process in a way that's going to make them feel okay.
Right. Do you think some of the delays or labels of like dyslexia, ADHD, do you think all of those do play a role in the kids understanding?
I do. And I think when they can start to understand what like labels are on them, like I don't have a problem with labels, especially as they get older, because it helps them then have an understanding of who they are. So if a child is diagnosed with ADHD or dyslexia, really them understanding what it is and how that can be a superpower for them, and
Yes.
how they can then start to identify with who they are and just understand themselves better. And really celebrating the differences and celebrating whatever it is that you could say issue or whatever that diagnosis or label, whatever it is that they have.
Yeah.
Because everyone has something. That's one thing I tell the kids I work with. Everyone has something, whether you I mean, there's always something we all have. And it's just understanding that about yourself and learning how to manage it.
Yeah, I could totally agree to that. But one thing that I want to point out is what you said is like seeing their superpowers in that,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing that, because I do have some clients say, oh, it's because I'm dyslexic. Oh, it's because I have this. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I do not agree on letting your child have a label for an excuse.
No, yeah.
Letting them have that label to empower them and to help them understand that there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
At all. You're going to learn differently. You're going to learn it this way versus other people learning it this way. And guess what? Everyone learns differently.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are visual, some people are auditory, so it's all of that, I think, plays into it. But, again, back to the anxiety. What do you feel creates this anxiety in kids, especially in kids? Because adults, we could say, oh, well, it's what you've been through and what you've been exposed to and your beliefs and all this. But what do you feel is going on with the kids, especially now? Because I'm seeing an influx of it now.
I think it's a lot of things. I think it is the time I think we're living in a very interesting time in the world. There's a lot of chaos everywhere throughout the world. And even if your kids aren't necessarily watching the news or on the computer or whatever, they're hearing it in other places. So I do think that adds to it. I think the constant media exposure, all the computer stuff, all the gaming, I think that can add to it. I think I think in the home, if there isn't set schedules, if everybody's working and running and going, I think that can add to it. I do think that a lot of times that if we're stressed out as the parent, if we have a lot of anxiety, if we're having a really hard time, it is going to trickle down to your children. And so really having that place for yourself to be able to get centered and get to the place where you're calm, and then that will then pass down to your child. But you have to know that about yourself first. And a lot of times it's hard for people to even identify that they're struggling with anxiety or just stress.
Right. And I would say that because I think a lot of people, as parents, like we're busy parents, like we're working, like in my house, both of my husband and I work. He's gone. I travel a lot. He travels a lot in his business. So there's a lot of uncertainty here. So we try to create, like, we have a structure here. We have a schedule. So no matter who comes in, whether it's a family friend or a family member, the twins always have a schedule. It's the same schedule. So they have normalcy.
Yes.
What I see changes is if they have to go stay somewhere else outside.
Okay.
Because then again, like what you said, the whole structure changes. It's not their bed. It's not, going into their closet, getting their clothes ready. It's not going to the same place where their lunch box is to pack their lunch every day. Like everything's changed in that moment. So just, pointing out what you said earlier about the structure. And I also see this with parents too. It's like at school, they do fine, but at home they have this issue. And it goes back to what you were saying is there a structure, something that they have certainty in? Like kids have certainty when they're going to go to school. My kids can tell you when they have, recess like that. They definitely can tell me what time they have recess.
Yeah. And lunch.
They know what comes after lunch. They know what comes before lunch. Like they know their schedule.
Yeah. I love it. They love schedules. And I like what you were saying too, about that you do both work and you both travel. And I think that's a really important point because your schedule is constantly changing and busy, but you're keeping it regulated for your child. And so that's a really important part to make is that if you are going to be a family that does work and does making sure you have those structures in place and taking the time to get it organized, spending the money to pay whoever it is that you need to be there, And it's not easy always because you've got to find the right people and you have to get the right structures, but it's definitely worth it for your child.
100%. Like we literally have a printed out schedule that literally does not change because it's the same thing. Like when they go to tutoring, when they have soccer, our boys play soccer, so it's almost year round for them, but it's always Tuesdays and Thursdays. We know their schedule, and and that's definitely true. Like when we get someone to come, they know that this is the schedule and this is what we adhere to. But what we also see is less behaviors too. To your point is that, I look at behaviors as communication. When there's a behavior going on, there's definitely something going on that the kid is trying to express to you in that moment.
Right. And they don't have the language necessarily, and they don't even understand what it is. Like they might not be able to understand if they've never had the structure or their life's always been in chaos. They don't even know what it is wrong. So it's really hard for the parents to start figuring out because they don't have the words. No one has the words. And so you have a lot of behaviors and a lot of chaos in the home. So yeah, I completely agree with you. It's really tough if you don't have that in place.
Yeah. One of my clients is 8, and I was telling the parents that I said, here's what I see going on with his behavior is that the moment he has a behavior, everything stops. He gets your full attention, and then he's able to, express what he needs to express. And then he's able to come down, and then he comes to you, and then you guys talk about it. What we need to do is teach him to voice what's going on before the behavior, right?
Yeah. And then also I think too, it's that feeling of safety. It goes to like the whole thing with the brain and like the frontal lobe. And when they're in that back part where they're in that fight flight, they're not going to be able to explain it or talk. And so they want that safety from you as the parent. And so when they get that and you're talking to them and they're feeling safe, all of a sudden their nervous system is completely calming down. So when you put those routines in place and when you have all those steps and things happening, they're safe. Just like your kids, they feel safe. They know what's going to happen. They're safe. Everything is fine. You could be in another country, state. They probably know when you're going to call. They probably can text you. And so they know they're safe. They're in their own world and it's a safe place for them.
And we have calendars, so they can like go in, they see the calendar. We've color coded when dad's gone. We've color coded when mom's gone. So we pre-frame what's coming up. I was just talking about it before the show because my husband's gone and then I leave right after he gets back. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm leaving this day. Dad's going to be here. Because we really do try to plan it where if I'm gone, he goes. If I go, he stays, right? So we do the best to do that. However, there are times that we do travel together. But again, it's the structure. And I share what we do because I think that it just gives you guys examples of for our listeners, what structure looks like. Having color-coded calendars, having the open communication, like we're going, tell me what happens when we go, when can you call, because there's a time difference. So we pre-frame a lot of our things. And I do believe that's why, the kids feel safe. They feel there's a structure, there's a foundation that they have absolute certainty. And that's why I said, I believe that anxiety happens when there's a lack of certainty in that child's life.
There is. And also too, another thing I was thinking about of ways that I talk with parents, sometimes children, getting them to find an interest, something that they're interested in is really helpful as well. So getting them engaged in activities that they enjoy, like soccer or dance or gymnastics or whatever it is, really getting them involved in something like that and supporting them through that, I think also helps with reducing some of that anxiety because you're going to find something that they then excel in or feel good about. So that will also help.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that. Finding something that they enjoy doing, that's why I think sometimes art therapy is really good for kids because those that can't verbalize it, they can just kind of express it through drawing, coloring colors, and different patterns and different things like that. It just gives them another way of, again, if you can get it out, you could feel safe. I have another client who I believe, has some anxiety and like her brain doesn't stop. And when her brain doesn't stop, it creates that anxiety in her. So she's trying to constantly calm the brain down, And so we talked about it. I said, when that happens, one of the strategies I gave her, I said, get a journal and write it all out. If you just write it out to get it out of the brain, Your
Mhm.
body is saying, okay, it's coming out now. Like I'm getting it out, because sometimes it happens at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and then it creates this, and then she's up all night and then has to go to school, and she's just beyond tired. So again, it's that. It's like, I don't know when my brain's going to stop and I can't sleep. So it creates that, like you said, it goes to the back of the brain to that fight or flight. Like, what do we do? What do we do?
Mhm.
And when you get caught up in that, it's so hard.
Yeah. So the key is to not get that. And I talk to parents about that a lot. The key is to help not let that happen. So it's always the preventative. It's always preparing. So if you have a child that it's really tough for them to go to school, right? So school's tough. Some kids don't like to leave you on a Monday morning because they're so attached. They might have some attachment things happening. So really every Sunday you're prepping for that Monday morning by language, talking about it. You have your routine in place. And so really that prepping, the preventative, the preparing, so they're not getting in the fight flight, doing breathing activities. I do a lot of meditation with my clients now. So really getting them to a place where you're preventing them from even getting in that fight flight.
And so for parents that are curious about how do you introduce meditation to children, what is one way or a couple ways that you do it that kids are like, what? You want me to stop and breathe? You want me to close my eyes? You want me to listen to this? Like, this is stupid. How do you push through that?
Definitely. Yeah. I've done that. I love teaching kids about meditation. So I always usually start with, just that we get a very quiet place, just sitting. I let them either sit or they can lie down. I love to do body scans with kids, which basically they focus on one part of their body at a time. So we'll start with the head. I'll be like, close your eyes, focus on your head, focus on your eyes. So I start there with them, really doing the body scan where they're focusing on each part of their body. That's really helpful because that helps them get into a state of like a meditative state. And it's a very easy way to get them started to understand it. You can do some visual meditations with kids, like have them visualize they're at the beach or wherever their favorite place is. So I've done that with kids, but I love doing body scans. I think it's a great way to help them because it also gives them something to think about. Because like you're saying, close your eyes and breathe. Kids are just like, they'll start thinking about whatever it is, like TV or Fortnite or whatever. But if you have them actually thinking about their body, it keeps them focused on like whatever it is that you're saying, like focus on your feet or now feel how heavy they are or whatever, however you can do it. There's also some great scripts online. If you just type in body scans online, if you're a person that wants to learn how to do some meditation with your kids, you can find some great scripts online that you can read and do them with them. So,
oh, I love that because I've done this with adults, but I didn't even think about doing it with kids. That's an amazing idea to do a body scan with a child,
And it's fun to do it with them. I've even sat in my office and done it with them. So we'll both lay on the ground and then I'll read it and I'll be like, all right, when we do it together. They love it whenever you do it with them. You can even find some recordings of some on different apps. So you can do all this kind of stuff with your kids, which I think is great to model it.
So when you tell them that, how do you pre-frame what you're going to do with them?
So we'll talk about, we're going to do like a meditation to calm down, just to get calm and to relax. Because sometimes when they come in, or if I'm seeing them, they're coming from right from school, or they're really stressed out, or they've had something. So I will help try to get them just calm. So I tell them, we're just going to calm down. So I'll usually turn the lights down. And I tell them too, like, if you're uncomfortable, you don't like this, just let me know. But usually they're excited. They're just interested in it. And after they've done it with me a couple of times, they understand. So I just let them know that we're going to just pay attention to how our body is feeling. We're going to just focus on each part of the body and just get it to relax. And then when we're done, you're going to feel completely different. And so then, and I'll tell them, like, I want you to think about how your body feels now. And then we're going to talk about it when we're finished. And what do you see the difference?
I love it. I love it. And what you're doing, what you're describing is actually creating that space between calmness and that agitation and that, that, I don't know, I almost want to call it the rush of life that's going through them, So it gives them time to create that calmness in their body, to give them space to create that own calmness. And what I also like about it is also teaching them how to self-regulate.
Yeah.
That there's a way that you're like, wow, like my body is actually doing this. My thoughts are controlling my body right now. Like, that's why I'm in this anxiety. So as much as your body can control that, your mind can control that, your mind can also control calming it down and giving it the certainty. One of the things that I do with my clients when they're like having a panic attack, even, and I've taught this to them, is like to activate their five senses.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's 5 things you can see right now?
Yeah, I'd like to know.
What's 4 things that you can touch? What's 3 things you can smell? Like stuff like that. Because number one, it redirects their mind from what they were having the panic attack about. And some kids don't even know. They're like, I was sitting there and all of a sudden this happened. But there's something that their conscious mind was thinking of to put them in that fight or flight moment. And so to get them out of it, it's to activate the 5 senses so they can have something tangible that they're doing and their mind's actually processing it, the information through the senses. And I've had amazing results with my clients with that, especially the ones that are in high school.
Yeah, that's a great one for them. I agree. That's a really, really good one. The high school kids would love that. Yes, you're right. Really good.
And another one that I used, because I was diagnosed with the anxiety years ago, and I used to take medication for it, and I got myself off of it. And one of the things that I would do is, because I knew it was caused by the uncertainty of whatever was going on, I created what was certain. So I'd ask myself, what's great? And I would answer it. Like, what's great is I can breathe. What's great is I can see. What's great is that I have full control. I'm driving. What's great is I have a house. Like just little things in the moment. And next thing you know, I was fine.
Yeah.
Like it totally diverted the whole panic attack.
That's amazing. I think we forget like how much control we have over how we feel. Our mind can switch. Like if you start thinking about something like if someone passed away, that's going to start making you feel very sad. And you can get yourself to a place of even crying. But then you can also flip that and think of a place that you absolutely love to go, like a trip, and really start focusing on that. And then it'll make you happy. So I think you're making a great point on how we have the ability to really change how we're feeling. And we forget that.
Yeah.
Our mind has so much power.
And I tell my clients, physiology first. So think about your physiology. Like when we go into anxiety, think about what your body's feeling in that moment. How is your breathing? How is your shoulders? And then like, what are you focused on? What are your thought processes? What are you telling yourself? And let's just change it. If your shoulders are up, put them down, walk, get some water, like just change something, the physiology in your body, and then start to refocus on something different and then tell yourself something different, and what I think if we're teaching these kids at a young age is that what they actually have control over. Because what I see is that these kids, a lot of the anxiety come from because they don't feel safe. They don't have control over things.
Yeah, it is. Yes, that's a huge part of it. And I think by teaching them at a young age, it's a preventative, right? They're learning, it becomes a habit then. And then they know it's a habit that they'll learn when they're younger, that they're not going to have to deal with it as much when they're older, because they've learned a healthy way to respond.
Right. So some of the things that, just to recap, is to really look at the environment. Is there structure? What's going on in the environment? Is it bringing them safety? And, that's why I say boundaries. Like I always tell parents, my kids need boundaries. I said, think of your house. Your house is your boundary. It makes you feel safe. Kids need that. And I think with the boundaries comes what you were talking about, is structure. Even at school, kids know what the boundaries are. They know what the rules are. They know what they can and cannot do. And if you break the rules, there's these consequences. And school hasn't changed. It's still the same way. And that's why it still works. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I've seen an influx of this more so though after COVID.
And I think a lot of that is because we're all like, I think everyone's struggling, not just the adults are struggling, like I was saying earlier. And so that trickles down to the kids. And so really it's us as parents really focusing on us. I always talk about like when you're on an airplane, they say to put your oxygen mask on first, that we need to do that for ourselves. The same thing here. We've got to figure out what's going on with us before we can help our kids. And so if we can calm ourselves, if we can get regulated, that's going to do wonders for the dynamics in your family.
Yes, absolutely. So, so how do you suggest to your parents, um, if they're coming to you and they're saying, I get what my kid's feeling because I go through that myself.
Mhm.
One of the things I do is I check in with them. I'm like, well, what do you do to, get yourself through this, or, to, proceed with what you need to do? And some of them are like, oh, I take medication, like I take a pill, but I don't want my kids to take pills. Okay. So do you suggest anything to the parents? Do you give them things to do with their kids to literally start helping them too?
Right. Yeah. So with parents, I try to do, I mean, it's a more in-depth process because we've had such a longer history. So I do a big family history with parents. If I do have a parent that is having a lot of anxiety or depression, really getting with them to the root of it. And then I might refer them to work with someone, or if it's not as serious, helping them learn strategies to get it under control. But because it's usually, like you were talking about earlier, there's a root to the problem typically. And
Yeah.
so we all have histories of traumas or whatever has happened in our lives, which could bring on stress and anxiety and depression that you might not even realize. So I really work with parents on understanding what that is, and
Nice.
then helping them get a handle on it. And then from there, when they can start talking about it, understand, then they're going to be able to help their kids with that.
Yeah, 100%. For me, I felt it was realizing when I got real stressed, when my tone of voice would change, when things would change. And it was always when I was rushed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I noticed the kids were picking up on it. And I'm like, oh, because they feel rushed. So now my whole thing is, how do I set us all up to win? The best way to set us up to win is not feel rushed in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
It's not feel rushed. Does that mean I need to get up an extra 15 minutes early? Does that mean that I need to shower before I get the kids up? Like whatever that means. And I share this again for our listeners all over the world that's listening, is that, again, it's putting your own oxygen mask on. It's what do I need to do to make sure I'm showing up as my best me to show up for them.
Yeah. When you're talking about the school thing, we've had like a late night or something we've done. So I've even gone to school late. I mean, I'm to the point when I was growing up, you would never do this. You had to be at school no matter what. But I've taken my son to school late. If we had a lot going on, I let him sleep. I get up slowly and we go to school late, because I figure it's better that we all are like you're saying, not rushed. He's gotten enough sleep, and then he can get to school. And then if he has extra homework later, that's fine. But I always think about whatever's happening in the moment and try to do exactly like what you're saying, is like, be present, what's going on, and then what's the best. You don't always have to follow exactly what you think is the right thing or the normal thing to do.
Right. Well, because the protocol that's given to everyone doesn't suit everyone all the time.
Right. Yeah.
We have a life, we have different things going on. Stuff happens, emergencies happen, and it's like if your kid was in the emergency room till 3:00 in the morning, they're not going to school at 7:00, at 8:00 in the morning. You're going to let them sleep,
Exactly.
So it's so I can fully appreciate that headspace, definitely. And it's also, what I always tell people, and my listeners like, oh, I hear this every show, but like, this is our boot camp from birth to 18.
Mm-hmm.
What we get to install in them now is going to reflect on them as an adult. So if we're teaching them now at a young age to meditate, to be calm, to, do body scans of like, what am I feeling right now? And what do I want to feel instead? If that feels hard in my heart and I want to make it soft, what would I need to make it soft? What would you want to wrap it in? A soft blanket? Oh no, water. Okay. So let's put it in water then. So we're going to soften it up. If we could teach them this stuff now, how will that show in their life as an adult?
Yeah, so true. And I think when I grew up, like in the 80s and 90s, it was just about go. It was a different, I think we have now things are so crazy, but there's also this place of self-compassion that's starting to open up in the world where we all can feel it we feel like it's okay to take it. And I don't think it was that language was around then. And so really having self-compassion and knowing it is okay. It is okay to take a break and to have that self-compassion for yourself, because you need it or your child will need it. And I think that is a blessing that we're hearing that more now. I think people are understanding that a little more than they did when I was young.
Yeah, because I didn't even hear the word compassion. I didn't hear the word gratitude. I didn't even hear the word celebrate. You celebrate if your team won. That was a celebration, and now the more and more we're doing that. But I'm also seeing that the more we're being in tune with this, the more kids are having self-worth now.
Mm-hmm.
That we're celebrating the little things that they're doing, that we're showing them what compassion is. So how would you explain self-compassion to say a 7 or 8 year old?
So let me think, how would I explain that to them? Really being able to look at a situation and know that it's okay for you. I don't know if I would use the word self-compassion with a little one, but helping them see that their views are okay. They're okay in their space, in their moment, in their body, and whatever it is that they're doing, and to just be able to feel okay with it. Because a lot of times we look, especially as after they're 9 or 10, they look to the outside always. And so
for that validation.
Yeah, really feeling that for yourself.
Yeah. So I do the same thing. I was like, I tell them, what do you need to do to feel okay right now? Mm-hmm. Like, you're okay feeling whatever you're feeling. I get it. You're upset. Yes, I'm upset. Yes. And it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Your body's doing exactly what it needs to do right now.
Yeah. And let it out. And don't push it around. Like I joke around all the time with my son about not pushing down his emotions. And so making sure, because I say, like, if you keep pushing it, you're going to explode. It's going to explode. It's coming out somewhere. So either it's, let's talk about it now, or it's going to come out at a different time in a place you might not want it to. So, and I work with that with my families as well, is really learning the language, like the feeling words and the feeling language, understanding your emotions. So you're not pushing everything down and you're able to express it.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because it's going to show up somewhere else. And, and I do believe that our emotions show up in our ailments that we have in our bodies.
Yes, I do too.
And because everything's energy.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you push it down, somewhere, somehow it's going to,
Yeah. And it goes back to the anxiety, like you're saying. It goes back to that.
Because I have some clients that are constipated all the time. And the parents are like, I don't know what to like. I think that's the biggest physical ailment my clients tell me.
Really?
Like, their kids are constipated. Yes. And then when I start talking to the kids, it's what's going on. And like, they're all binded up, like emotionally.
Interesting.
And I was like, wow. So like putting emotions to that,
mm-hmm.
And then being able to talk about things, and then also telling the parents to add some more fiber to their diet, get rid of the processed food, get some more whole foods in there, some more fiber, green vegetables, but also just, having them be able to have that safe space to communicate without the judgment,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like, when I got my daughter a coach, she was like, well, you're a coach. Why don't you coach me? I can't. Like, I'm your mom. You definitely push the mom buttons. We have our moments, especially as she's getting older and going through puberty, and definitely hormones are definitely going. 1 minute she's sweet as pie, the next minute she's, a rattlesnake, and the next minute she wants to love all over you. And it's like, yep.
That age is a tough one.
It is definitely, and then it triggers me, right? Because I'm female, I'm emotional, and I'm going through it. Like, we definitely are riding the wave together.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. And I've always been a boy mom, like I have stepdaughters that I've, seen I've been in their life since they were 3 and 6, but like every other weekend, not every day.
Yeah.
Through the emotions of life, And so this is my first daughter experience. Boys are so much easier.
I know. We have our moments and our things and our crying and
so dramatized.
Yes, everything is so big.
Yes.
It's so
yes. Big. One little thing, it's like, oh, this, and I'm like, okay, well then we're gonna go there. I guess it's that big,
Yeah.
But I also think that, to your point about not shutting down our emotions or shoving them down, I think that also creates the anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't know what to do with these feelings. And then they get scared to show feelings, because in their mind, they've given a meaning that I'm not supposed to show feelings, or I'm not allowed to have these feelings, or these feelings aren't correct. So I think that self-compassion, when as kids get older, what I teach them, like the 14 to 16, 17-year-olds that I coach, is give yourself grace.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to give yourself grace, what would that look like? Because, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I do believe that, it's, if you're crying, don't cry. I'm going to give you something to cry about. That's the era I grew up in. So it's like I would secretly go to my room and cry so nobody can hear me because I didn't want to get a spanking or anything, and I pushed down those emotions. And so because how I grew up not feeling great about myself, low self-worth, low self-esteem, and growing up that way, I want to give kids a childhood they don't have to heal from. So how do we help them identify the emotions that they're feeling and that they're okay to feel?
That's really good. And I think it's funny because my younger parents I work with the little one, they're doing this already. So many of the feeling words and the feeling language, it's the older parent, like the older ones that are struggling. So we do a lot of like having feelings charts, bringing the language into the home.
Yes.
I talk a lot because we didn't use those words. And I think even in the 90s and the early 2000s, people still weren't using them as much. But now just really starting to bring those feeling words into your home and in books when you're reading, talking about how a character feels. How do they understand? Like I talk about picture books a lot, getting just books from the library and going through them. And when you're reading the story, just not necessarily always sticking with the words, but talking about like how the character is feeling. What does that feel like to them? How do you think the other person feels? Really starting to have those conversations, which then will give the kids the language to be able to express and to communicate with you on how they're feeling. Feeling charts are great to put on the fridge or a poster in a bedroom or anywhere. I love feelings charts and words and all that kind of stuff because it gives the words that are there available to then be able to use to express how you're feeling in that moment.
Yeah, I don't know where it was, but I had a chart with a bunch of kids' feeling words, and I printed them out.
Yeah, I love those.
Just so we can you can just circle it, you can point to it, and so you have a wide variety of, it's more than just happy, sad, frustrated, mad.
Right.
Like there's more feelings than that. Sometimes we feel confused. Sometimes we feel, like hurt, but like not physically hurt, but our feelings are hurt. So it's more than just sadness, so it's definitely identifying that. Another thing that I also do is I help kids see it from the other perspective. Like if there's conflict or something, it's tell me if you're standing in their body, what are they seeing the situation as? Especially when kids have anxiety, when there's conflict.
Yeah. And that's hard because it's hard for all of us to have to be able to confront someone and talk about a problem. So yes, and kids are so egocentric that they're really just thinking about themselves all the time. So it is a really great skill for them to learn early how to have conflict resolution, how to learn how to confront someone in a healthy way and talk about what is happening and having that boundary and having the understanding of the different perspectives.
Right. Right. And the other thing that I want parents to understand is that kids come into this world knowing that we can control it, like we're their safety. Then they go through toddler and young kids realizing that, wait, I can walk. I can do this on my own. Like, wait, I can do this. I have control of this. I don't need to wait for you to pick me up to move me across the room. I can go across the room on my own. Now control sets in. And now when they're in the young kids age and like going into preteens, they want to control everything because having control makes them feel safe. And the minute they don't have control of the situation, especially with their little peer group, they don't feel safe. And so I am starting to, especially because my twins are 11, teaching them, because from we started about 8 years old teaching ownership. Like, I understand he should not have taken the remote control from you. I get it. You're upset. Tell me what you could have done differently. And so just starting that conversation at an early age. And so now the conversation is much different. It's like, what are we going to do to solve this? What's the solution that you're going to do? Because now it's you got to take full ownership.
Right. And you started young with them. And I think that's the key, is really starting as young as possible. the conversations of not just being like, give them back the remote control. And that is so easy to do, right? Why did you take the remote control? Give it back to her.
Yep.
But you didn't do that. You were like, I understand you're really angry that he took that from you. Let's figure out how could we have handled this situation? And so many people, we forget to do that. We forget that, oh, we can talk about this. You don't have to just give them a directive and tell them no and tell them to stop. Like, it can actually be a conversation, which then as they get older, then it can be a bigger conversation. And they're going to have the words then to tell you about things that are happening outside of the family.
Yes. So I have an event at the end of this month called Thriving Together, and it's virtual. And my co-presenter, Tammy Tintilla, we're going to be talking about not just partnership on how to get on the same page, but also how with your kids, how do you bring harmony in the home? And part of that is releasing this anxiety. Part of it is what you and I have been talking about, is that structure, having a structure in the home where kids feel that they have an open, safe, and trusting space.
Yes.
And identifying what that means to them. Because to you and me, we know what open means. We know what trusting means. We know what safe means. But do kids? For kids, it's not feeling judged. I had a client today that shared something with me, and she texted me last night and told me she was going through a challenge. And today we had our coaching, and by the end of it, she goes, "Thank you." And I'm like, "For what?" And she says, "I was really scared to get on this call with you tonight." And I'm like, "You were? We've been coaching for a year. Why are you scared?" And she says, "Well, because for the first time I text you to tell you something that I was doing, and I didn't know if you were going to judge me." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Have you felt judged in the past?" She goes, "No, but I've never told you anything like this in the past either." And I said, "So how do you feel now?" She says, "I really feel safe."
That's good.
And that just lit me up, that she felt safe enough. And what that meant to her was not judged.
Yeah.
And that's what kids want. They want that safe space that they can come to you and say, "Mom, I did not make a good choice. I did this. I smoked a cigarette. I, inhaled on a vape, or, whatever it is. I took a sip of the alcohol at my friend's house." If they can come and talk to you about that, because they know that you're not going to judge them.
Right. And I think what happens is we judge ourselves as parents, and that's why they're scared, because we are judging, and then because we react to it. Like, why did you do that? Like, and you might react in this really angry way and want to punish them. But go back to the remote control. If you had that open communication with them, they're going to come to you in a different way about it when they're older.
Right.
And
absolutely.
So, it all starts when they're, and if they're older and you've never done it, you can start small. Just start small with small, and even saying to them, "You know what? I have watched something. I have a new way I want to try to talk with you." You can always change it. You can start tomorrow. It's changing how you talk with them, and start small with it.
And I like to just add, for us parents, give grace to other parents. Mm-hmm. Like that's one of the things when you were saying that the parents are going to judge. Like, I know for me, when I was raising my other boys who are now 29 and 25, I would react because I'm thinking, what are people going to think about me? Mm-hmm. What are they going to say about me? I'm a bad parent. I can't be a bad parent. And I had this meaning of what bad parent was.
Yeah.
And I had a coach years ago that said, "So Veenu, what is a bad parent?" And I'm like, someone who doesn't care about their kids. They let them do whatever. They don't care if they eat. They don't care if they bathe. And they're like, "Oh, so that's you." And I'm like, "Well, no, that's not me." And they're like, "So then why do you think you're a bad parent?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." But again, it was that I felt I was going to be judged by other parents, the other parents at the soccer field, the other parents at the football field, or the other parents that know that my kid took a hit of the cigarette. I feel that I was going to be judged. And because a lot of parents do, they're like, "Oh, that must be a bad family. You can't go." Instead of, "Hey, what's going on?"
Or even like, we're all on these different, even if you have like the healthiest family, your kid's still on their own path, and they're still their own human. It's funny because my son, I did a conference at school, and everyone knows my career, what I do. And the teacher's like, "Yeah, the other day he was in math class, put his legs over the chair and said he didn't want to do math anymore." I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, I told her I just didn't want to do it." It was so disrespectful. I'm like, what is happening? So immediately I get to the self-talk of like, these people are probably like, why is her child talking to me like that? And so you go to that, but he's on his own path too. So then afterwards we had a discussion about why he didn't want to do the math and what he was angry about.
Yeah.
But we all go through that, and the kids are going to do the stuff they're going to do, and they're whatever level they are developmentally. And so you just have to be there to support them. And I think that's the biggest thing.
And asking the kid, what does support look like for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I asked a client the other day, I'm like, should your mom contact the teacher? He's like, no, I got this. And this kid's like not doing well. You don't really got this. You think you got this, but you don't got this. And so it's, okay, then what else can we do to support you? If that's not the support you need, then what it is. And again, that also helps create that open, safe, and trusting communication with your kid when you're asking them, because nothing has a meaning but the meaning we give it. And our kids, I promise you, have a different meaning to things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or this whole evening, my daughter and I have been going at it because she has a whole different meaning of what her assignments and what she's doing and what she's not understanding than I have, you know? And so it's really helping them understand, you know, the meaning they're giving it. And is that accurate, or is it what they want you to think it is? Right. So, but we're already out of time. I can't believe it. This has just been so great, Anastasia. I love having you here. I love bringing your clinical perspectives to this, because it's really helping our audience all over the world. So, any last thing you want to leave with our audience?
Just have fun with your kids. Don't judge yourself. Be compassionate. All those things.
Yes. And thank you so much. And as I always say, be curious, not critical. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Redefine Parenting with Veenu Keller. Follow her on Instagram at Veenu Inspires. To learn more about Veenu, as well as download her free ebook now, go to www.veenuinspires.com. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it.